This video is my reaction to the Seattle Seahawks 38-14 win over the Washington Commanders. They went into DC and just dismantled a Washington team. It was a shocking performance in the first two quarters, obviously, from Sam Darnold. He went 16 of 16 passing with 4 touchdowns in the first half to 3 different players. Absolutely one-sided gameplay. Torrey Horton had 2 of those touchdown catches. In fact, the initial pair to put them ahead 14-0. About 9 minutes left in the second quarter, following a spectacular interception from Ty Okada. The Seahawks defense was able to limit Jaden Daniels, sacking him 4 times. Unfortunately, the fourth one, he suffered a pretty serious injury to his elbow or his arm. Made the trip east and garnered their second blowout win of the season, in this case 38-14. Darnold finishes 21 of 24 passing with the 4 touchdowns. 330 yards is his second highest total of the year. He had 341 in the home loss against the Bucs. Now Darnold has 16 TDs in 2025, completing 70% of his passes for the first time in his career, in fact. It's a long season left to play, right? And a lot of throws left to be made. He was at 66% completion percentage last year in Minnesota when he ended up with 35 touchdowns. Now, after a 21 for 24 against Washington's defense, he's over 70%, I think 70.3. JSN has another spectacular night, 8 catches, 129 yards. The 8 catches came on 9 targets. He just tortured the Commanders' defense, whether it was zone or man. They clearly made poor tactical choices trying to play man early. He also drew a defensive pass interference penalty on, I think, at Lattimore in the first half. Didn't score last night, but Horton did. His 2 touchdowns, really opened up a Commanders defense that, at least when I have seen them, has really struggled. Their stats look better than the gameplay I've seen. I was able to witness them last year come to Washington, really get shredded in the pass game and the run game. Tonight, or last night I should say, was really no better. Seattle had their way. I guess actually the run game wasn't totally dominant. 79 yards on 21 carries, so it leaves something to be desired for that matter. But Seattle's offensive line was great in pass pro throughout. They really walked away with an easy win on a night when they didn't have Cooper Kupp, Jake Bobo, Derek Young, all 3 wide receivers who have caught passes for them in 2025. In the case of Kupp, obviously more than the other 2 guys. And then all they do with a wide receiver group that's, described as thin coming into the game is get 2 scoring catches from Horton, one from the first of the career, in fact, for Elijah Arroyo, and then Cody White, whose 60-yarder made it 28-0 in the second quarter. Really, the game is over at that point at 28-0. The Seahawks defense had totally taken apart Washington for the most part. They did give up a late touchdown, late in the second quarter, and then another one in the fourth when the game was over. They picked off Daniels. They had sacked him, I think, 3 times in the first half. Almost a second interception on a really poor decision from Daniels throwing to the tight end out near the right sideline. With 3 or 7.5 minutes left, Daniels is still in the game. Somewhat questionable decision, in my opinion. The Drake Thomas sack, clearly he's not trying to injure the guy. It's a horrible break for a quarterback who obviously is really talented, number 1. And number 2, I think had dealt with a leg injury earlier in the season. Given the score, 38-7, and the situation, I think it's really fair to ask, why is the starting quarterback in the game when you're down 31 points? But the drive did begin with 12:30 left in the game, but it culminated about 4.5 minutes later. I just think Thomas is playing football, making a tackle seems unpredictable, in my opinion, and obviously really unfortunate. Seattle came into this one, however, with plenty of health concerns of their own, primarily at wide receiver, like I mentioned earlier. Josh Jobe went out with a concussion, I think he's in the protocol at this point. He was hit by a teammate, I think it was Okada, in the second quarter. It's really unfortunate or confusing, I guess, that as soon as you get Witherspoon back, which was great to see, then you lose the boundary side corner who's playing at extremely high level in Josh Jobe. Who knows, he might need to be out for a while, since I think he was in the concussion protocol earlier this season, but I could be wrong there. In any case, he went out, he didn't return. And then Ernest Jones IV also got injured. It looks like a right knee. Got rolled up on, I think, by an offensive lineman in a run concept. Huge loss there if he's out for a while, but McDonald, I think, was pretty clear in his press conference last night, which I didn't get a chance to watch, but I just read the script, or had AI read the script to me, I should say, while I was working on this video. that it's not a season ender. So Seattle had plenty of injuries to deal with and navigate here. We heard a lot about, during the game about what Washington didn't have. Terry McLaurin and others. Seattle was missing Julian Love. Devin Witherspoon just came back. They lost Job during the game. 3 wide receivers. Kupp's a big part of the offense. So as far as injuries go coming in, I'm talking about, I really have nothing to consider there in terms of evaluating this game. If these two teams play 10 times, Seattle wins the overwhelming majority of them fully healthy. 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 in my opinion. Regardless of health status and location, Darnold is a superior processor of what happens post-snap. He's getting rid of the ball quickly. They have the best wide receiver in the league right now, they being Seattle and JSN. He's at 58 catches on 79 targets, 73% catch percentage. Of course, you can mention Jamar Chase and others, no problem. JSN didn't have a touchdown tonight, so he's stuck on 4 for the year. He's already approaching 1,000 yards receiving. If I did my math correctly, he's at 945 yards so far for 2025. Just a ridiculous start for him and for Darnold overall. They just exceeded 30 points for the 4th time in 2025. They bounced back from a 4-turnover performance against the Texans 2 weeks ago at home, where they really kind of played with their food for a little while. They outclassed Washington on both sides of the ball. Daniels was ineffective before he went out with the injury. I know he finished 15 of 22. He did scramble around some, 153 yards passing, had the 1 interception, could have been 2. Seattle made things difficult with generally an organic 4-man rush, and I felt like there was a lot of times where Daniels didn't even go through a progression at all. He would just take off immediately in his read, like get to the back of his drop, and if he didn't see the first read open, gone. It's something that I noticed last season when he came to Washington and played, or Baltimore and played, and then when they defeated the Lions in the playoffs. A lot of their plays are very horizontal in nature with a zone read and a bubble attached to it, and he didn't go through a ton of progressional development, in my opinion, and I thought that before this game. So when you're put in a situation where you have to process things quickly, he just took off running, and I think that there's some development that's got to occur there. In any case, keep in mind Seattle was without 2 of their defensive starters, or actually 3 at some point, with Love and then Job and Ernest Jones going out. Eventually, they actually outgained Washington 418 to 290. Kubiak's offense averaged 8.7 yards per play, including 13.8 yards per pass from Darnold. The depth at wide receiver, might not have been a source of strength before the season, but it certainly is now. At this point, you're eight games in. 6 different players have receiving touchdowns. Now, 2 of those are tight ends, right? Barner has 4, and then Arroyo added his first career touchdown. That was a beautifully designed play from a heavy personnel group. When I get the film available to me, I'll obviously try to get some videos out Monday into Tuesday. This win reminds me a little bit over the victories over Pittsburgh and Arizona, in that you could kind of tell mid-second quarter that Seattle was, the more athletic, the faster team, stronger, and they were just playing more decisively, particularly on defense. The Cardinals obviously fought back at home to close and actually tie the game at 20-20 before Darnold's hookup with JSN led to the game-winning field goal. In this case, no heroics were needed, obviously. They just poured it on offensively. Only a third-quarter interception from Darnold that's really what stopped them from reaching 40 points scored for the second time this season. I have them at 28.87 or 28.9, if you round up, points per game. That should be based on 231 points in 8 games so far. They only got to 375 total point output in 2024, 17 games. So they're on pace to obviously, exceed that, even match possibly their 2020 and 2018 teams that scored a total of 459 and 428 in a 16-game season, obviously. Darnold's been tremendous. A lot of credit has to go to Kubiak and the offensive staff. The design, the play calling, they've often been on fire with the pass game, even when the run game's not dominant or not in control. And I mean, whether it's deep stuff, intermediate, a couple of throws that Darnold made, the third down conversion to JSN was spectacular, where it's kind of a low snap that's actually a little bit late. Darnold's clapping to get the ball. He catches the ball a little bit low, processes things on a 4-man rush, moves around in the pocket. Maybe he shifts one time in the pocket and finds JSN for a first down. I thought that was amazing. I do want to talk about one thing related to the offense, and that is this, what I call tour metric. To talk about the Seahawks offense for a moment compared to their defense. Over on the right-hand side for you guys, the column that I'm kind of clicking on now, that's a one-game score from 0 to 100 for the offense. The column just to the right of that, tour allowed, is what the defense allows. So last night, offensively, was a 73 on a scale score of 0 to 100. In addition to that, up at the top, you have some descriptors for the various categories. It should be 10 categories. Penalties per game is something that they're above average in right now. It's all the way to the right and down bottom. Poor in turnovers per game, and then rushing yards per carry. Everything else, if you look at the descriptors, the green descriptors underneath, forgive me if the font's too small. Elite in yards per play. Excellent in points per drive. Elite in sacks allowed per game, which I think is a product of the offensive line playing well, but in addition, Darnold processing things quickly, understanding the reason behind what Kubiak is calling, and then knowing where to go with the football. And then completion percentage kind of in the top middle, like the 12 o'clock position or almost 1 o'clock. 70% excellent. You got above average descriptors for the 4 in the middle, success rate, red zone touchdown percentage, third down percentage, etc. Obviously, the third down percent rate was really poor against Jacksonville in the win down there, and that's what caused that game to be super low from a tour metric standpoint, a 26 over to the right for week 6. You just kind of have to visually match it over. And then in addition, 2 weeks ago against Houston, it's the 4 turnovers and 2 sacks allowed that really pulls that score down to a 21. Last night was a 73 against Washington. A 47 allowed is a little bit surprising. I think it's because of the rushing yards that Washington was able to get to in terms of total output. I thought the return of Witherspoon was a big deal. He's physical. He's hostile. He tackles well. He had 2 really nice tackles out in space, I thought. He had 7 overall, playing really nice coverage. Jones, I thought, is just, always at the football. He only had 6 or maybe 7 tackles last night before, getting injured and having to move to the sideline. Apparently, he was moving around on the sideline, celebrating some plays. Knight came in, and he did finish with a team-high 10 tackles. Thomas had the interception. Overall, Seattle, I think, gets to 7 quarterback hits, 4 sacks. Leonard Williams had 1 of them. He also chased Daniels down on a 4th and 15 scramble in the second half. It looked like Daniels was going to get out of there. He had room in front of him to the right side. Another situation, I think, where Seattle brings 4, and Daniels just gets to the top of his read. Maybe he looks at one read, perhaps a second one, and he's gone. There were 4 other players besides Williams who had split sacks. I thought Daniels was under constant pressure throughout the first half at least. And that's when the Commanders' possessions go punt, interception, fumble, punt, to the point where Seattle was up 28-0, right? After the 60-yard touchdown pass from Darnold to Cody White. Seattle has 28 points. Washington has 41 yards. Totally one-sided gameplay. Really, the game is obviously over at that point. Daniels is a competitor, though, and he led a touchdown drive late in the second quarter. And then Darnold and Seattle match it with a field goal. I do not understand that catch situation to JSN at all. The refs seem to be really hyper-focused on reviewing that play. Fine. If that's an automatic review inside of 2 minutes. What is the point of a 10-second rundown? Why is the offense being penalized for a completed catch that the refs ruled was out of bounds? It doesn't make sense to me for if they ruled him to be down in bounds, then the offense would run up and they would spike the ball. 10 seconds may not actually elapse. It might be 7, it might be 6. Who knows? It could be as much as 8, 9, or even 10. My point is I don't understand why a referee ruling that gets overturned by an automatic replay necessitates a 10-second runoff. Seattle allowed it to occur, called the timeout with 3 seconds left, kicked the field goal, I think a 41-yarder by Myers, puts them up 31-7 at the half. I do want to go through some of my halftime notes, and then I'll talk about some overall observations here at the end. I literally just kind of read out my halftime notes because I like to do that. I used to kind of publish them for Ravens games, put them on Twitter so people could see my halftime thoughts. But in any case, Seattle's, through 30 minutes, they've destroyed the Commanders' defense. Darnold throwing 4 touchdowns and the only thing that stopped them was that stupid 10-second runoff that doesn't make any sense to me at all. But in any case, they settled for a field goal and have been successful in rushing only 4. Darnold was on fire, 16 of 16 in the first half. 2 TDs to Horton, 1 each to Arroyo and Cody White. And the 28-yarder I thought was a brilliant play. They go hurry up after a first down. I think it's the completed pass to JSN that I talked about a little while ago. 3rd and 5, and it's a 4-man rush. Darnold gets a low, possibly late snap as the play clock is close to expiring, and he gets the football out to JSN after a little bit of pressure, kind of having to move around in the pocket, and they go hurry up. And the very next snap looks to me like White is in motion from right to left, and Darnold is under center. And he's supposed to C-gap insert. I believe he's supposed to insert between the right tackle and the tight end. But it looked like Washington kind of closed that gap off. And so he just ends up running between the corner and the safety. I think it's Trey Amos and one of the safeties rolled up into the boundary, expecting possibly a run maybe. All Darnold's got to do is get the ball to him quick enough such that he can make a move on the free safety who was in the middle of the field deep, and he was able to do so at the point where we get to 30 minutes elapsed. Seattle had 330 yards of offense, and they were averaging 12.2 yards per play. The run game wasn't meager, but it wasn't overwhelming. 48 yards on 11 carries in the first half. They had touchdown drives of 90 and 60 yards before they kicked off with a 14-0 lead. And then the D-tackle, I think it's Pili, slapped the ball away on the return by Jalen Lane. And then one play later, Kubiak, brilliant stuff, man, goes heavy personnel. I think it's 13 personnel. Maybe it's 22. In any case, it's play action. Arroyo up the left seam beats what to me looks like a backup safety or something like that. It was another one-high look for the Commanders, who really had no options for what to do defensively. Darnold appeared to possibly look to his right real quick where JSN was, probably just to hold the safety in the middle of the field, such that he couldn't get over there and deal with Arroyo. It was a strike over top of Arroyo's right shoulder, maybe a slight bobble there. He catches it, controls it right before he gets in the end zone, and then I think those guys showed great ball security multiple times last night. In this case, Arroyo kind of using both hands. That makes it 21-0. And they had 2 touchdowns separated by 11 seconds. Between the second one to Horton, where he beats St. Riesel for a big touchdown on a post corner, and then the 12 or 13 personnel touchdown to Arroyo. The ones for Horton were badass. The win against St. Riesel, he's a good player. I think he's got 3 picks this year. Maybe he had 3 last year, so it's a total of 6 in his career, or maybe it's 5. So he's a good football player from Michigan. He was a guy that I remember watching a lot of draft footage of prior to the 2024 draft. Washington got him. Their defensive structure, their defensive coverage is really poor for the most part in the games that I've been able to watch them. St. Riesel got a pick later on in the game. It doesn't really match the one that Okada had on a 3rd down pass from Daniels. I suspect Daniels would like to have that back. He threw it near the sideline. Very similar to one where Drake Thomas was defending the tight end on the right sideline. The ball was kind of tipped by the tight end. Daniels is just kind of throwing the football up, and the one that Okada picks off, I think, was very similar. I would classify one, if not both of them, as poor decisions, with some pressure being applied on him on the play. Overall, I felt like the Seahawks were using a 4-man rush scheme for the most part, but occasionally, bringing 5 or 6-man pressure, essentially forcing Daniels to get rid of the ball at a moment in time of their choosing, they being Seattle. Seattle was in control, clearly, holding Commanders to 4.7 yards per play in the first half. And Washington did get to 157 on the ground at the completion of the game. That's a season high in terms of rushing yards allowed. You had 6 consecutive games for Seattle of giving up less than 100 yards to their opponents on the ground, including the last 3 games against the Texans, Jags, and Bucks in reverse order. The total rushing output for those 3 teams against Seattle was 171. So is there a cause for concern here with Jones possibly being out? I don't necessarily think so, but if he were to miss 2 to 3 weeks, yes, you would get a drop-off in athleticism, technique, understanding of the defense, command, just overall impact, right? I did an Ernest Jones the fourth video last week. And if you guys want to check it out, I'll try to link it up here at the end of this one. The Commanders did have 2 long touchdown drives, one near the end of the second quarter to get within 28-7. And then, as Daniels leaves with injury at the completion of their next to last drive, it started with 12:30 in the game. Seattle's ahead 38-7. Not sure, why he's obviously on the field at that point, but Dan Quinn probably has addressed that, I'm sure, in his press conference after the game. Charbonnet and Walker, they did have brief moments of space in the run game. They were only able to total or produce 67 yards on 19 carries. Seahawks have not been able to consistently produce a ton of yards on the ground lately. In their last 3 games, you're looking at 266 yards total on the offensive output from the run game. But the play-action pass is working. Darnold on third downs is extremely sharp, getting the ball out quick. Really seems to have a great understanding of the coverages that he's seen. And now Seattle heads into 2 division games in a row, right? First at home against the Cardinals, and then on the road against the Rams, who are also 6-2. I enjoyed trying to produce this reaction video. I was unable to get it done late Sunday night after watching the game. My apologies for that. But hopefully you guys enjoy it today. If you did enjoy the video, please let me know in the comment section. Number 1, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And then finally, if you think other Seahawks fans would enjoy my work here, the reaction video where I try to talk about as many concepts and techniques as possible within the context of Seattle's 38-14 win over the Commanders, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.